Okay, so are you ready to dive into the world of UFOs from a completely different perspective?
I am.
All right, because today we're talking about Dr. Garry Nolan.
Okay.
And this is someone who I think will really challenge the way a lot of people think about UFOs. He's a geneticist at Stanford, so we're not talking about, someone who just like dabbles in UFOs on the side. Like this is, his life's work is really understanding.
He's a serious scientist.
Yeah, human biology at the cellular level.
Exactly.
So he studies DNA,
Right.
but the way he thinks about DNA, I think, is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
He doesn't see it as just this fixed blueprint that you're born with, and that's it. He sees it more as this, like, computational reservoir.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it really changes how you think about it. If you think about it as this, like, dynamic, interacting, constantly changing thing.
And being shaped by the environment, which I think is a really crucial concept to understand when we start talking about.
Right, and that's what's so wild about it, right, is that it sort of upends this whole nature versus nurture debate in a way, because it's saying, well, both are completely intertwined and...
Yeah, your environment is actually...
Right.
Like writing your DNA in a way, or like changing...
Yeah. It can influence the expression of your genes.
Yeah. So if we can accept that as like a starting point, right? That like our environment is actually impacting us on a fundamental biological level.
Yeah.
It kind of opens up this crazy door to like, what if there are other things out there that are impacting us that we don't even realize?
Exactly. And that's where this idea of, are we just ants?
Yes.
To some other intelligence comes in, right?
Like that's one of the analogies that he uses.
Right. And we study ants,
Right.
We observe them. We might even in some ways experiment on them, but
do we try to communicate with them on
like, do we really understand what it means to be an ant? No.
Yeah. And so he's saying like, what if there are these intelligences out there that are so far beyond us that we don't even register to them? Like, we're just ant.
We're just going about our business, and they're just observing.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even observing. Maybe we're just irrelevant.
Yeah. And it makes you think about, like, how much do we really understand about what's going on?
Exactly.
In the universe.
And how much of what we perceive as reality is actually just a tiny sliver
of
what's really out there.
And that's where things get really interesting, because he starts talking about these tailored sensory experiences.
Yeah. What do you think about that idea?
Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, when I first heard him say that, I was like, okay, what is he talking about? So basically he's saying that what if the way that we perceive reality is just...
It's just one way.
One way of
perceiving
to perceive reality.
Right, like we're limited by our senses.
Yeah.
What if these other intelligences have completely different senses that we can't even comprehend?
Yeah.
And so they might be trying to communicate with us.
Right.
But we're just not.
We don't have the ability to even...
We're not equipped to pick it up.
Yeah, and so maybe that's why people have these really strange UFO encounters where they see things that seem impossible or unexplainable.
Right, it's like they're getting a glimpse of something that's beyond our normal.
Our ability to even comprehend.
Our frame of reference.
Yeah, so instead of seeing like a giant spaceship in the sky, which our brains might not be able to handle,
right,
maybe we're seeing something that's tailored to our own individual perception.
Right, or maybe even our collective perception.
Yeah.
As a species at this point in our evolution.
Which is a mind-blowing thought in and of itself, but then it makes you wonder, like,
yeah,
is that why we're so obsessed with technology?
That's a really interesting question.
Is it possible that our pursuit of technology is actually making us more receptive to these tailored sensory experiences?
Like we're building the tools
to
perceive.
Almost like we're tuning into a frequency that we weren't aware of before.
Right, like we're expanding our senses in a way.
Yeah, and that maybe that's part of the plan, right? Like maybe these intelligences, if they're trying to communicate with us, they're nudging us along.
Like it's a gradual awakening to something far grander.
So our drive to innovate and to explore and to push the boundaries of technology, maybe it's not just human curiosity.
Right.
Maybe it's something more profound.
Maybe it's written into our DNA.
Yeah, like we're being guided even if we don't realize it.
It's a trip, man. It's a total trip.
Yeah, it's a total mind trip, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to Dr. Garry Nolan and his perspective on UFOs and the nature of reality itself,
there's so much more to uncover there.
There's so much more to uncover. This is all pretty mind-blowing, but I know what some people might be thinking.
Look at that.
Where's the proof?
Yeah.
Like, this is all interesting to think about, but like, what about actual UFO sightings?
Mm-hmm.
What about encounters?
Right.
What about the evidence?
Well, Dr. Nolan has looked at that too.
He has?
He's actually investigated countless UFO reports himself.
Wow.
And even examined materials, allegedly from UFOs.
Really?
Yeah, so he's not just theorizing about this stuff. He's actually out there in the field looking at the data.
So he's taking it seriously.
Taking it very seriously.
I like that.
Yeah.
So does he have any, interesting stories from his investigations?
Oh, yeah, he's got tons.
Okay, I need to hear one.
Okay, so there's this one about a family driving down the highway.
Okay.
In broad daylight, like totally normal day.
Okay.
And the two kids in the back seat, they see this craft hovering above their car.
Like crystal clear.
Crystal clear. But here's the thing.
What?
The parents in the front seat see absolutely nothing.
No way.
No other cars on the road seem to notice it or react in any way.
Oh my God.
It's like only the kids were seeing it.
He's so weird.
So they're freaking out, obviously. They're trying to get their parents' attention.
Right.
But the parents are just like, what are you talking about?
Oh my God, this is giving me chills.
And it gets even weirder.
Okay.
So one of the kids grabs their cell phone and takes a picture.
Okay.
But when they look at the photo later,
what is it?
There's no craft.
What?
Instead, there's this bizarre star-shaped anomaly hovering above their car.
You kidding?
Nope.
Oh my God.
Something that wasn't visible to the naked eye.
So creepy.
Right?
It's like, what if our reality is way more malleable than we think?
That's exactly what Dr. Nolan is getting at.
What if our brains are filtering out information or only showing us what we can handle at a given time?
Exactly.
Because if that's true, what else are we not seeing?
Right, what's really out there?
That's so wild to think about.
It is pretty wild.
Okay, so with all these sightings and encounters, though, how do we separate the genuine anomalies from the misinterpretations or even the hoaxes?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
That's what Dr. Nolan is trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And he always emphasizes the importance of rigorous scientific scrutiny.
Of course.
We can't just jump to conclusions no matter how tempting it might be.
Absolutely.
We need to follow the evidence wherever it leads.
I totally agree.
And a great example of this is his work on the Atacama skeleton.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, this was back in the early 2000s.
That tiny mummified skeleton.
Right, 6 inches long?
Yeah, with the elongated skull and the weird ribs, and everyone thought it was alien.
Everyone lost their mind.
The internet went crazy.
It was everywhere.
It was aliens are real.
Right, and people were drawing all these conclusions based on a few blurry photos.
Yeah, and then Dr. Nolan comes in with his scientific method.
Exactly. He's like, hold on a second. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
He wanted to actually study it.
Yeah.
So he managed to obtain a DNA sample.
Oh, wow.
And did a full analysis.
What did it show?
Well, turns out it was human.
Really?
100% human DNA.
So not an alien.
Not an alien.
But still pretty weird looking.
Oh, yeah. Definitely still an anomaly.
So what was going on?
Well, the DNA analysis showed that the skeleton had multiple mutations.
Okay.
In genes associated with bone growth.
Makes sense.
Yeah, specifically genes like COLA1A1 and VDR.
I'm writing this down.
Which help regulate bone development.
Interesting.
So these mutations basically explain the skeleton's unique features.
Oh, wow. So not an alien, but still a fascinating medical mystery.
Exactly. And for Dr. Nolan, this case was pivotal.
How so?
It wasn't about debunking the extraterrestrial theory.
Right.
It was about highlighting the importance of scientific analysis.
Right.
In separating the truly extraordinary from the easily sensationalized.
I love that.
Yeah. He's all about keeping an open mind, but not letting our imaginations run wild.
Yeah, we need a healthy dose of skepticism. Okay, so where do we go from here? It's amazing how much we've already uncovered, right? It really highlights the importance of approaching this topic with that, healthy dose of skepticism, but also scientific rigor.
Absolutely. You can't just jump to conclusions no matter how tempting it might be.
Right.
We need to follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Yeah. And speaking of evidence, Dr. Nolan has some pretty strong opinions about government transparency when it comes to UAPs.
Oh, yeah. He's a big advocate for that.
Yeah. He believes that they have information that could be, crucial to our understanding of this phenomenon.
Right. They're sitting on data that could unlock so much.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, what's really going on behind closed doors?
Exactly.
Why the secrecy after all these years?
Well, the 2021 Pentagon UAP report was interesting.
It's a pretty big deal.
It was definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah. It felt like a crack in the wall of secrecy, for sure.
Right. They finally acknowledged that there's something there.
Yeah. And they couldn't ignore it anymore, right?
Exactly. The cat's out of the bag.
I think social media has a lot to do with that too, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. The internet has changed everything.
But there's just too much information out there now.
It's impossible to control the narrative anymore.
And people are asking questions, demanding answers.
Right, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
It means we're finally having a real conversation about this.
Exactly, and it's not just about government disclosure anymore, right?
No, it's bigger than that.
Like, there are scientists and researchers all over the world who are taking this seriously now.
Yeah, the Galileo project is a great example of that.
Yeah, with Avi Loeb and...
Yeah, they're out there actively searching for evidence.
I love it.
It's an exciting time to be interested in this stuff.
It really is, and Dr. Nolan is a big part of that shift.
He's a pioneer.
He is. He's like, you don't need permission to investigate.
Yeah.
Like, if you're curious, go out there and explore.
Follow the data wherever it leads.
I love that philosophy. And, you know, it reminds me of that analogy he uses about the islanders.
Oh, yeah, the island analogy?
Yeah, like we're stuck on this island thinking it's all there is until one day we realize there's a whole vast world out there beyond the horizon.
And that's what this feels like right now.
It totally does. It's like we're on the verge of something huge.
It's both humbling and exhilarating at the same time.
Absolutely. Like, it makes you realize how much we don't know.
But also how much there is to discover.
Yeah. And maybe in our quest to understand the universe is also trying to understand us.
It's a trippy thought.
It is a trippy thought and a perfect note to end on, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your minds open because the truth is out there.